Welcome everybody to this week's show, episode 9 of You Can't Comp This podcast. We are very grateful this week to have Laine Pearce to join us from 130point.com, and also PSA Submissions Australia joined us this week, and we discussed a wide range of issues, including his start in the hobby, how he got to become submitting 4,000 cards a month through PSA Submissions Australia. We also discussed the changes that's happening at PSA, and we also discussed a review on last week's Marx Cards debacle. So a really interesting conversation with Laine, and in fact it went for so long that we have split this week's episode up into 2 parts. So you'll get one episode tonight, and then on Wednesday or Thursday we're going to drop another episode then too. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show. Adam, how are you, mate?
I am great. How about yourself?
Very, very good. I'm enjoying this cooler weather, I must say. We were complaining about the hot weather last week, I think.
Look, don't hold your breath. The hot weather's back, and it will hit us with a vengeance. So
yeah,
make hay while the sun doesn't shine, I guess. This is the...
And we have got a very special guest this week. So, Laine, how are you today? Welcome.
I'm very good. Very good. Thanks, guys, for having me on. And yeah, you're talking about things being hot, but I think the hottest thing at the moment is all the news in the card hobby. You guys have touched on a lot of it last week, and it just keeps coming thick and fast.
It just keeps coming, doesn't it? Yeah, exactly.
We wouldn't think it's, 30th of January when we're talking at the moment. And it's just every day there's something new, something big happening, and the rest of the year. It's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah,
it could be something centered around. I'm gonna start some protests and rallies, and we're gonna hashtag regulate the hobby. This is I feel like this is the path we're starting to tread. There's a lot happening.
Oh, good luck with that international regulation.
I don't think many people are going to come to your picket, mate. I reckon let's get you a T-shirt.
COVID got everybody on board with stuff. I'm sure that this isn't impossible. Oh boy!
At the national convention, you're going to be out the front, are you?
That's it. Picketing. I'll have a T-shirt. No.
So, Laine, why don't we just start with how you got here? What's your sort of your hobby journey, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've told a few people this one over the years, and it's sort of appeared on a few podcasts here and there. But really, look, I'm most of us who are in our 30s at the moment, we all had a crack in the 90s at collecting, whether it be through ourselves, through someone we knew, our brothers, our sisters, our parents, whoever it might have been, or just happened to be down at the milk bars when they used to exist, and we had boxes of Fleer, at our local milk bar.
Yeah.
So it was everywhere. You couldn't get away from it, and really that's sort of where I had 2 older brothers, so they sort of introduced it to me. I was in primary school, and they were in sort of starting high school, and cards were appearing, and everybody was into it, and I'd sort of joined in with them because being a younger brother, you just sort of follow along.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, my oldest brother, my middle brother, he decided that he was going to, jump on the bandwagon and become a Jordan Chicago Bulls fan. And my other brother, for reasons best known to himself, chose the Minnesota Timberwolves and Christian Laettner at the time.
Yeah, wow.
Oh, wow. Polar opposites.
Which he regretted for the rest of his
life. Still suffering, really.
Does he still support Minnesota?
No, look, I reckon if you asked him, he'd say yes, but he dwindled off in terms of actual active supporters years and years ago.
That's a tough ride, man.
Yeah, there are not many of them out there.
No, even to the point where he had a Garnett jersey and he eventually gave it to me because he wasn't that keen anymore. So, but no, look, that was them, and me and my brothers we were never, like all good brothers, you could never agree on anything together. You always had to fight over something. So, I picked Phoenix Suns at the time with Charles Barkley because he was the the guy that I really liked in terms of how he played and everything, and Suns were doing well at the time, so. Yeah. Had to pick a decent team, and little did I know that was the best they were going to do for the best part of 2 decades. But as a long-suffering Suns supporter, Suns and St Kilda supporter,
boy,
I was very good at picking teams that were half decent in the 90s and then fell off the radar for a long time. So
it seems to be a common duo. I know a couple of people that go for Phoenix and the Saints. It's.
Yeah, not sure.
You don't happen to go for Oakland in the NFL?
No. I was equally as dumb with that. I started with Atlanta Falcons. So.
Oh no.
And then that was when I actively followed, but I sort of fell away from that for a long time. But once again, another team that went pretty much all the way to the precipice of winning a Super Bowl and just let Tom Brady steamroll them. So anyway, that was kind of my initial collecting journey, and like a lot of us, we all sort of fell out of it a bit later on when we got a bit further into high school or became a teenager, and collecting bits of cardboard wasn't as cool anymore, and had other things to worry about. So dropped off in the mid to late 90s. But I did sort of pick up boxes here and there through the early 2000s. Picked up a few and sort of mostly collected the set of 0405 Upper Deck basketball, just the base sort of set, the hobby set, because there was a few cards available where I was living at the time. And then just every now and again I could pick up a pack at a newsagent when they did appear occasionally through the 2000s, but it was rare. And then from there, sort of just dabbled around here and there, but it wasn't until maybe 2014 I started watching these things called breaks that were happening on YouTube. And this bloke called Grayson for this company called Cherry was busting out of his apartment in South Bank, I think it was at the time, with his dog running around in the background. And but like I just at that time I was sort of just really for the best part of maybe 6 months I was really just sort of watching what was what was happening with the card market or what was out there. I didn't really know much about what was going on, all these new, different sets and releases, and people were paying thousands of dollars for boxes even back then. And that, when I'm saying thousands, that was for a box of Flawless, $1,000. It just makes makes it look ridiculous.
That sounds about the right price point.
Yeah, for 2015, right?
Exactly right.
We all look back on that now and can only dream. But and that was watching all that. I really sort of always loved Topps Chrome, even though when I wasn't collecting, I'd sort of seen the Chrome stuff and liked it. And Prism was the closest thing to it, and it was a reasonable price point, and I liked the silver Prisms and the variations you could get. So, I jumped in pretty hard early on with Prism, 2015-16. Did the full complete base set. It was my first thing I did, and then I jumped in and also did the full rookie silver Prism set and rookie Red Wave Prism set. So that took a bit of time and a little bit of money even back then, because they were hard to find, a lot of those cards. The Red Waves were numbered to 350 back then. So having something numbered to 350 was a good. It was a high number even back then, but now they're not even numbered Red Waves. So
that's a really cool chase, man. Yeah,
and that was kind of the start of the collecting bit for me again.
Yeah.
And then after that, I guess a few years later, after being in the hobby for a while and sort of collecting again and starting to understand how things work and trying to price cards and find information, I was just sort of struggling with a few things that I thought I would have thought were going to be available to people who were collectors, and that was sort of where 130 Point came about. Originally started off as a redemption website. The intent was that I wanted to learn coding. It's something that was interested me, and I knew it sort of has value, even if you wanted to take it up as a profession, as value in it, and it was just something that interested me. So I decided that building a website somewhere around cards was something that would be passionate for me and I would actually enjoy doing and see some benefit to, as opposed to just some other sort of hobby. And then part of that was, what am I going to build it around? And to me, it was something that I always sort of wanted to know was, if I got a redemption from a break, how did the card already been signed by the player? And Panini had been releasing the redemption checklist, sort of, or their weekly releases, of what redemptions had been signed and released for a while. And I thought, let's start with this. I can grab all their spreadsheets, I can build a database with that data, and I can make a website where you can go and search and say, Steph Curry, or Steph Curry, National Treasures, or whatever it might have been, whatever card it was. So I put that together, and that sort of helped me learn a whole bunch of skills with coding that were important, and sort of got that up and running. And while I was building it, I was still going into Cherry, quite routinely and buying boxes and having a chat with Grayson and just talking about things. And he kind of pointed out that not many people are really going to want to jump on and just, that website might be useful, but it's not going to get a huge amount of traffic, because who really wants to just look at redemptions? And I'd already been kind of looking at checklists that Panini had as well, and how they were similarly structured and how I could use them. And I thought, what's the next logical thing? Put up all the Panini checklists onto the website. So yeah, look, that was a bit of an undertaking, because part of the way I've set the website up is that you can actually, break it down into, what's the base, auto, memorabilia, and auto mem numbered cards in a release, so you can actually get a bit of a picture of that. So I had to basically retrospectively go back through every single Panini checklist ever made and assign those values to each card from each set ever made. Which was time consuming to say the least. It took me months of sitting there at night just going through, putting ones and zeros next to cards and filtering by the word signature, ink, script, all these terms that Panini used to set them up, and you have to go through and do all that. So that was a bit of a long process that I eventually got through, and that was I guess the important thing for me was I wanted to do that because it was information I wanted.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I didn't actually know if anybody else was that keen on that information, but it was something I wanted, so it was just something that sort of drove me to do it. So yeah, over the time that one's sort of been a big part of the website is all those checklists and set information and all that sort of stuff. And then eventually we moved from that into the next sort of step, which is the pricing, the eBay sold pricing, and now it's moving into more than just eBay, but we can talk about that in a bit after. But really, that came about because I was using some of the other websites at the time that were out there for the same purpose. And the way the data was coming up and some of the things how they were showing things, I just thought I could see a different way of doing it or
Yep.
another way of having it. So I built something that, once again, I wanted to use, and took feedback over the time from people who said, maybe it could look better if you did this, or can you do that? And got feedback from a bunch of people. And not to say it's perfect or anything, but it definitely, I find it's still something that to me is quite usable. And the interface isn't perfect sometimes, but realistically, it's more about getting the information out to people as quickly and as easily as possible, and allow them to make decisions on their cards themselves. So yeah, that kind of started the sales part. I guess the searching part came about maybe about 2017 later, a little bit later.
Yeah, I remember the original searching. You were doing a lot of testing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes a bit to sort of build up. There's a lot on the back end of it that goes into making that work, which people don't understand. And I every day or two I get a message from someone saying can't find my card, or like an email, and it's just like sometimes it's just literally the subject line, cards not showing up, and I'm like, that's I understand that might be the case, but I need some more information, like what cards, what are you searching for, what are your search terms, what page are you using, all that sort of thing. So it's it's still a work in progress. We're always trying to find ways to improve it, and there's a lot of things happening this year, hopefully, that'll be coming down the line with it.
To be fair, that might not be your coding, mate. We get a lot of messages in our group chats and on our Facebook walls. Not every day, but what's the value of this card? To a degree, for some people, it's just too hard to find the price of your card.
And the biggest thing,
people are weird.
And look, the biggest thing I find too is it's education too. And most of the time when I've just educated people, I try my best to get back to most people who email me and say, look, have you tried this or do you do that? Doesn't always happen, but as best I can, I try and get back to them. And a lot of the time I find it's just people who are trying to be way too specific. Like they'll literally put in every single detail about the card, thinking that that's going to get them the answer.
Yeah.
It's the same as Google. You put too much into Google, you don't get great results. And you need to sometimes just look at it and go, what are the minimum number of terms I need to get the result I want? So putting in, like 20, 20, 21, LaMelo Ball, Prism, Silver, Rookie, BGS 95, this, that, and just adding on card number and everything, it sometimes is too much. Like in a card like that, you're usually fine. But if you're talking about more obscure cards, less is more. And sometimes it's literally like writing Steph Curry net marbles, and you'll get a heap of results, and you might have to manually in your head filter them out, or just go through the list and go, that one's good, that one's good.
Yeah.
But it's better than getting no results found.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right. So that's what I've found. It's just a bit more about education sometimes, and I've done videos and I've produced stuff and got search tips here, there, and everywhere. And sometimes people just don't see it, don't read it, and you've just got to kind of give them a bit of a nudge and point them in the right direction. But yeah. So for the most part, though, we're trying to make things better and faster, and that's where we've sort of moved now into a new page that's still, I guess, in the final stages of what I would say is beta testing before we make it the live search page, and sort of replaces the existing sales current page that's there, and that's one that's got a completely new back end on it. That's compared in terms of speed, it's probably 10, 20 times faster than the legacy one, and it incorporates more than just eBay sales. So at the moment we've got eBay My Slabs in it. There's another marketplace getting added to it and probably going live next week, hopefully even tomorrow, but it just depends on when I get some time. It's probably more likely to be somewhere between Tuesday and Friday. We're also,
can you say the name of the marketplace, or is that to be released later?
No, it's probably fine to give you guys the exclusive that it's no, we've been working. Look, a bit of backstory in general. We're working with a bunch of different marketplaces at the moment to try and get things in place. We've had some success with a few of them. Other ones are a bit harder to get through. It's like anything, right? You get an email from some random dude saying, "Hey, I want to chat to your dev team about, getting added to your marketplace," and they're like, "Who are you?" And then usually once you tell them who they are, they go, "Oh yeah, I know your website. Okay, I'll try and get you in touch with them." But they don't always, respond. Is I guess the main thing. It's sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So look. We're working at the moment with a bunch of different marketplaces, a couple of big ones, a couple of small ones, and I'm pretty sure there's not really going to be too much of an issue with most of them coming on board, and we'll get as much as we can. I'll eventually want to have as many marketplaces on there as we can, which is hopefully going to be quite a lot, but we'll see one day. But at the moment, definitely the first one next week that's going on is Pristine Auctions.
Great.
Nice.
So they've been very good, very forthcoming with us. It's been really good to work with. We're hopefully developing them with them a few more functionality in terms of their data that they provide us and how we access it. So at the moment, we're just going to be adding sold items from them. We've got pretty much everything set up, ready to go. I've just sort of got to hit live and do a couple of tests on it. And then, hopefully after that, we've got another major marketplace coming on board potentially, if all goes well. So that'll be more to come. But yeah, we're working as much as we can to try and introduce those other marketplaces to really, I guess, turn it away from being an eBay sales search tool into a search, a sales aggregator. But also items for sale as well. So it's not just about what's sold; it's also about what's for sale, and that's a big one too, right? You can actually use it rather than having to go to all these individual pages to search for items, which I find, even as a collector myself, I struggle to do. I struggle to go to eBay to look for stuff that I want for sale. My slabs, all these auction houses out there, whether it be Golden, whether it be Pristine, whether it be Heritage, whether it be Memory Lane. There's a whole bunch of them out there. I don't have the capacity myself to search each individual one of them to find cards I want. So I've probably missed heaps of cards for my PC that I could have potentially bought by not having the visibility of those sites. So, and I imagine there's a lot of other collectors out there too that are like that. So my aim is to basically aggregate as much of that together as we can through official means, and actually bring in live searches and a whole bunch of other functionality in this next sort of 6 months. That mean people get a lot more out of the website than they currently do. So yeah, we're still working, we're still pushing hard, and hopefully we can actually make some of these things up and running, preferably in the next few months.
It's it strikes me as like, because as I said, we went through the Luba Manifesto a few episodes back. It's really fun talking about it and the way that people need to innovate in the hobby in order to. This seems like that kind of innovation, that giving tools to collectors that really we all kind of want in the palm of our hand. It's just a big undertaking, I guess, to just, I suppose, collate that data. We discussed it about Card Ladder, like trying to find like PSA sales and things like that, and they put together some of it, and we talk about merging BGS, PSA, like other grading companies to see what, say, the true population of a card is. Because there might be a bunch of BGS 10s and a bunch of PSA 10s. So the question is, how many of this card are in circulation? I mean, we're approaching 6 billion Lucas.
Zions.
And I think the Zions have slowed a little bit. But
well, actually, that's a good point when you're talking about grading, though. The problem is they're not slowing. They're coming back in record numbers. All the ones that people sent 18 months ago in the lower categories, and even some of the high 500s, are all coming back from last year and the year before. So,
well, do you reckon PSA would charge them at Zion's current value?
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. PSA do look at average value of recent sales.
So since it's taken them 18 months and his prices have plummeted,
they've gone up, they've come back down.
Yeah. So. And everybody's like, oh, sweet, we're getting a bargain Zion when they come back.
Yeah, so it evens out. So yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, and I guess talking about the PSA side of things, that's
perfect segue.
Yeah, another thing we do through our Australian, I guess. We've got a registered business in Australia, a registered company, the Hobby Australia Cards and Collectibles. We've been running now under that banner for the best part of nearly 2 years. year and a half, 2 years. But we've been doing the grading, the PSA grading side of things now for, honestly, I sent, the first thing we ever did was Ben Simmons rookie cards. So we were talking about, 17, 18 era,
Yep.
was, well, 16, 17 year, but 2017 when we sent them, because back then that was when grading was starting to become more popular for even lower end sort of cards. We were some of the first people in Australia to send away Ben Simmons base rookie prisms for grading, and people were like blown away when we got it. They got a 10, and we sold them for $100. And we did a Raz for $100. 10,
Oh my God.
10 spots sort of thing, and we were filling it pretty quickly. So that was probably maybe even mid to early 2017. Now I think back to it.
And were you just subbing for yourself at that time, and like just you and your mates, or?
So it was initially me and one other person. We did it together, 10 cards each, 20 cards submission, and then didn't do one for a couple of months. But then I decided, look, I want to do this myself again, and just asked a bunch of people that I knew around, are you interested in doing it? If you want, I'll just start up a Facebook group where we can just all be in there in one group, and we can just start our submission process. And I think I invited like 20 or 30 people that I knew were interested, that I'd spoken to, and now we're sitting at, I haven't looked today, we're probably close to 6,000 people in the group now. So it's taken 4 or 5 years to get there, but we are 5,500 people now in the group, and a lot of those, let's be honest, came in over the last 12 to 18 months. We sort of grew from 2,000 to 5,000 in the space of 18 months, but it's been really good. We've managed to use that sort of a momentum, I guess, to go from being just a couple of people sending cards ourselves to sending hundreds of cards a month, sending thousands of cards a month, to being the first recognised PSA dealer in the Southern Hemisphere, and being part of their preferred pricing program, which allows us to pass those savings on to those people in the group who have supported us for so long, and new collectors as well. Man.
Yeah.
So we're still, we've seen a downturn, I guess, in terms of submissions due to the PSA turning things off over the last roughly 12 months almost, coming up now to when the market was 10 months.
It's just at the moment it just seems untenable to to sub.
Look, for numbers perspective, this time last year we hit our peak in terms of monthly submissions when we sent 4,500 cards to PSA in January last year, and we were literally at the point where we had 3 people working in the office with me, 3 people remotely doing submission data entry, and we were basically finishing the January submission and rolled straight into the February one. We had no downtime in between. Cards came back, and we had to sort of fit them in around everything else to send back to people and invoice and everything. We were kind of at full capacity, and that was pretty chaotic, I'm not going to lie. So it would have been pretty hard to maintain, but we would have done the best, as best we could if we could have.
Yeah, you would have worked it out. Yeah.
And even then, we still sent, I think it was 3,500 cards in March, and about another 2,500 to 3,000 in April, and February, about 3,500, and nearly 2,500 to 3,000 in March before that shutdown occurred. So we literally were lucky. We kind of heard rumours it was happening, and we got our submission paperwork in the day before they shut. So all our submissions were literally finished entering into their system, probably about 8 hours before they turned the system off, and we didn't even actually know that was happening for sure. We were just pushing hard to make sure if it did happen that we were in. So we snuck in, thankfully. So and now we're seeing all those subs finish. A lot of those are starting to finish up now. So all our under 100 grading from October and November in 2020 is starting to finish. So we'll be caught up to the under 100s, which turned off in February last year, within a couple of months, I imagine.
Yeah.
And then under 500s, they've caught up to January, February last year, and they cut off in March anyway. So we're getting close to the backlog, I guess, being caught up to. But the issue is that January to March period was when they saw more cards than they've ever seen. They saw more cards in basically 18 months worth of cards in 3 months come in that period. So things are going to be still a little bit slow for a while there, but it's still.
Do you think they've actually got everything under control, or they've just sort of opened it up because they've cleared the backlog? Do you think they've put more people on and increased their capacity, or is it going to happen again?
So they have I think they've learnt their lesson in that regard. The discussions I've had with them and the communication they're giving out publicly to everyone, they've got 80% of their staff working on the backlog still. So it doesn't mean that they're not still hiring. They are. They still have active advertisements out constantly for people to join grading, whether it be remote. There's a bunch of people in the different parts of the process that they're still hiring for, but they've increased their work like their physical location size immensely. I know it's more than doubled. I think it's quadrupled or something along those lines. I can't remember the exact numbers.
Yeah.
They've bought, or released the entire building over the road or something apparently. So there's been a huge expansion on their behalf in terms of their operations department, which is the key area for the actual physical grading. And they've also done a lot of work to employ people remotely in their initial teams to actually look at and do all their research for cards as they come in, to make sure that we spend a lot of time here on this end ensuring that what we enter into the PSA system is as correct as we can get it. But a lot of that's based on what people send us, and if we don't pick up an error on the way through, then PSA do a next check when it gets to them. That's in an attempt to make sure that when the label comes out the other end, it's correct. It's the right card, it's the right year, it's the right number, all that sort of stuff, right insert, subset, so forth, which can get mixed up in the process. So yeah, they've done a huge amount of work. So I think in terms of they've got enough people to actually maintain a steady throughput, even with COVID, people going out due to COVID and so forth, and that capacity has increased. I reckon if you looked 2 years ago at what they could achieve in a month versus what they achieve now, I imagine that the actual physical numbers of cards coming out of PSA is well and truly maybe 10 times more than what they were doing.
Interesting.
We saw it on Instagram. They've been showing what's sort of been coming and being graded through each month.
Yep.
Through like really November, December. I'm sure the January figures will be out in the next couple of weeks. But it's very interesting. Like, you're seeing common trends. You're seeing Pokemon cards being graded predominantly, and basketball. They're like the two. Is it Charizard and Jordan are like neck and neck?
Yeah, they were both up there. Yeah. No, there's been a huge amount of that sort of stuff, right, coming through, and we saw it too. We traditionally up until 18 months ago had only seen a handful of Pokemon cards because we weren't necessarily the go-to for Pokemon grading in Australia. There was other people doing it. It wasn't our market. I didn't know much about it. We've had a few people though come on board since then that have helped us out with some of the submission stuff when we were at our peak that were very, very, very knowledgeable in Pokemon, which was great.
Are you verifying cases, mate?
Verifying cases? No, we haven't started dabbling in that yet. Haven't started.
Brush up on your GI Joe knowledge first.
Yeah, we need that. That's the go-to right now, isn't it? 200% price increase already or something.
Oh god, get on it now. Well, I mean, obviously you've got an affiliation. Well, like you work very closely with PSA, but now there are a lot of different grading companies that have sort of popped up, we'll say, over the last 2 years, and they all kind of want their piece of the pie. Do you have any thoughts on the newbies on the scene, and would you trust a new grader, or what would it take to trust a new grading company?
Yeah, and look, I'm a big believer in competition is great. We need it in any marketplace, even when you get down to just two, a duopoly, it still can be a little bit lacking in that sort of, they both sort of sit happy and
Telstra and Optus.
Exactly right. They don't necessarily do a huge amount to innovate or do things for their customers more than what they are happy doing. They kind of get stagnant.
Yeah.
So it's great that, I guess, in terms of grading, we do have what I would call maybe the big three or two and a half with, predominantly BGS and PSA, but then you've got SGC. They are, in terms of when you look at where their strengths are, SGC is one of the best when it comes to vintage, alongside with PSA. BGS do vintage, but that's less of their, I guess, strength. They're still really good at it. They've still got the capacity, but in terms of when you look at the market, SGC and PSA hold predominant ground there.
For sure.
And then you look at the other side when you come to modern, ultra modern, it's definitely BGS and PSA for that. With SGC starting, they've built a lot of momentum over the last 18 months.
Yeah.
So to me, when it comes to these things, it's great that there are these other companies out there. It's probably not great that there's 50 or 60 of them now that have all popped up, and everybody, wants a piece of the pie, including, plenty of them in Australia that have started to appear here, there, and everywhere that just sort of do feel like a bit more like someone sitting in their house doing it themselves, not an actual business. But there have been some, we've got CGA as the CGA, who have been around for a long time, but
they do a lot of football and
they've gained a little bit of popularity, but obviously the secondary market doesn't hold hugely. And PSG more recently, Platinum Standard Grading have come on board, and I've had a chat to a few of the guys that work there, and they're doing their own thing. They're trying to make, they're trying to build themselves, from the ground up. And from what I've heard, they're trying to do it the right way. They're trying to, build the right people and build the trust and actually do things in the right way. But at the end of the day, it's early days for them still. And that's the key thing, right? It's all about, do you trust these people? Individually, you've got to be happy with the company. I can only tell you so much even about PSA, and you'll find that there's many people out there that don't like PSA for whatever reason, because they don't trust them or they don't like them, or so be it. But really, to me, it's about, do you have the experience? Do you have the qualifications? Do you have people trained appropriately? And this is, coming from my engineering background, we use the QTE, qualifications, training, experience. And in the card industry, qualifications really, it's not necessarily a big one, but it could be that you've got plenty of people running the business as a business, and they actually are qualified business people. They know how to run a business. Training wise, you've got people that understand grading, and for any business that's new to this, there's so many tricks, traps, pitfalls for new people in the grading world about, trimmed cards, fake cards, altered cards, even that they're the more nefarious sides of, cards that have been tampered with by being polished and buffed with wax and all these sorts of things. That's the more nefarious stuff, let alone just understanding the right subsets, the naming, the serial numbers, what's gold, what's tiger, what's elephant, what's zebra, what's goldfish, all these different things out there. And, then you get into Pokemon, and, people that understand Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or MetaZoo or, there's all these other things out there that are getting graded. It's so hard to have people that understand that in your company, because you're going to get cards coming from all of these different sources. Yep. So you can only really achieve that level of, I guess, experience over years of doing it and building up to that. And guys like BGS, SGC, and PSA have been around long enough to learn, the pitfalls back when it was less critical, I guess, less of a, if they stuffed up back then maybe somebody could have sold a card and made a couple $100 on it. But now if they stuff up on some of those big cards or those vintage cards or some of the cards that are likely to get trimmed or faked, we're talking about $10,000, $20,000, $100,000 stuff ups. So they've got the experience. They know how to spot these things very well. And they can actually usually, things happen. Some things get through still. Everybody's human. But they will, 95%, 99% of the time will pick up these things and actually they won't get through. But some of the newer companies we've seen, they haven't been able to achieve that same level of, I guess, rigor and quality and everything that comes with it. So,
and to your point, I think that's been pointed out on social media, and that people who are known sort of scammers, basically they're just sending these cards to multiple grading companies until they get through the grading process, and then they've got this dodgy card then just graded,
throwing darts at a dartboard, really. But I mean, sort of as far as getting the experience goes, and this doesn't discount from the credibility and reliability of BGS, PSA, but they sort of did their time in an age where we didn't have social media. Do you know what I mean? Like there was no, they got their reputation in the old school.
That's like Jordan. Jordan grew up without Twitter. Can you imagine the stuff that would be coming out about him?
Yeah. Like,
seriously, I wish there was Twitter for Jordan. How awesome would that have been? Like,
there was enough stories about, Vegas and gambling and all these sorts of things and night outs and golf courses. Imagine, there was some dude live streaming on the golf course around with Jordan. Like,
we would, it'd definitely be.
You know what? It's probably good we didn't, because it might have changed our perspective.
His legacy,
Well, but that's the thing. Like, I'm guessing. Look, wonder if PSA and BGS would have the same standing in the community if we'll use the evil. Well, not the evil, but the infamous term card porn was over in it was around back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And we had it. It's the information superhighway is fraught with danger, because I guess there is too much information these days. So
and I guess we have to look at it the other way too, is that those things like card porn and other things around social media for sports cards, a lot of them wouldn't exist if it wasn't for BGS or PSA being around back when it wasn't overly profitable.
It's this weird cycle. Like it's
Yeah,
Yeah, like without those guys doing their hard yards in the the late 90s, 2000s to build the businesses up and actually exist and be able to even accept stuff at moderate scale when this whole COVID sort of card boom happened, then we wouldn't have even had really a boom as such, because people wouldn't have had anything to send to. We wouldn't have, we would just been ripping cards and trading them like we used to. There wouldn't have been that whole, oh, I'm an investor, I can buy that box and get all those base cards and get them sent over here. And a lot of people malign the flippers and the people who are out there just to make money in the market, and it has pushed the market, pushed it to those stupid levels last year where we were seeing, I hate to use it, I know you guys might be fans of him, but like ball base prisms getting sent off for grading and coming back, in there en masse at a time, 18 months later when his value has dropped so much. That's kind of the extent of it that can't be maintained. But there's a happy medium somewhere in there that we're hopefully going to get to where, like we said, PSA can manage it without having to have 65 different grading facilities on 5 continents and all that. It just becomes a ludicrous situation where the cards lose all value versus what we had last year. I think we're getting close to that middle ground where we're going to see that we're going to have some companies exist and stay around, but other ones are going to disappear because they just don't get business, because people are like, oh, PSA, BGS, SGC, whether it be HGA, CSG, a bunch of those other companies that are kind of bubbling around on the next level down, get themselves to be that credibility. People really want to use them, and they can maintain that for long enough. There's going to be probably, let's say 5 to 10, probably closer to 10 that actually hang around for the long term, because it's what the industry can support. There's going to be a bunch that will just have to drop off just because the market probably won't be there for them.
Yeah.
You want to talk about it, Russell? I know you do.
So last week we spoke about Marx Cards, and I think the first person that did come to mind when we sort of were going through all that was yourself. So that's why we reached out to you, like, for comment, because I don't think we need to go through what happened with Marx Cards again in this episode. But if you didn't hear last week's episode, please just duck back and have a listen to that. I do think there's going to be quite a bit of fallout, from Marx Cards in terms of for people like yourself who are sending off cards. But I probably think at the end of the day, for consumers, like people who are, sending off cards, I probably think they're the ones who are going to be, affected the most. But I think even PSAs, I think they're going to have a fair bit of fallout from, what happened with Marx. And I suppose I just wanted to hear, what your thoughts were and, how did you feel when you heard about this story? Because I could imagine, from, your point of view, in some ways, this is kind of like the worst. I would imagine this will be your worst nightmare in a way, like, because there's so many things that's out of your control when you're doing a sub. And, in some ways, there's a lot of things out of your control too when, doing a sub. So,
yeah. Look, my previous job is an engineer. I was an aerospace engineer, right? So that was what I did. I'm built around building things that are in control and are very well defined, and the chance of failure is so improbable and remote that you feel comfortable because you
But
you
now
have
you work in trading cards. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah. So like I'm basically, as of now, kind of more full time on sort of cards, 130 point, and a few other things.
Yeah, I didn't want to ask that before because I thought that was prying too much. But like the way that you were laying it out, it seemed like you've got so much on your plate that I just assumed you were doing this full time now. Yeah.
I am now. It's only just been recently. So last year I was still working another job 3 days a week, full time. So, or part time, I guess, in 3 days a week. So I've transitioned across now in terms of actually working more full time on this year, which is good for me.
Yeah.
A little bit less stress as well in terms of having to manage two bosses, and one being myself and one being someone else. But look, in terms of that, like that, my I guess personality is someone who's very risk adverse in a lot of ways, other than going in card breaks every now and again, because that's a bit of enjoyment and a little bit of a thrill, but realistically I'm the sort of person that doesn't like to have that sort of lack of control. So for me, I deal with PSA directly. I've built that business with them, the relationship over years of hard work and actual thousands of hours at home, sitting at my desk late at night, entering cards manually into their system, like just grinding is the best way of putting it, to actually build a relationship directly with them, to be able to put ourselves in a position to become an approved dealer and to actually work directly with a PSA rep. Now, the way the sort of Marx Cards thing came about and some of the people that have the fallout from that. And the way that some of the business, by the sound of it, was done, I'm not sure about all the details, but I know that in some cases, fees are paid up front. So my business model has always been fees are paid at the end. I would rather hold the risk myself than make myself be in a vulnerable position to actually have people saying, you've got my money and my cards. What's going on? Where is it? And it just leads to, like, for me, would lead to more problems. And honestly, could you have, like, just, I'm sure you guys could imagine, could you have imagined if I'd taken people's money for grading in October 2020 and I was just getting it back to them now?
Yeah.
You imagine how many people would be hassling me on a weekly, daily basis because, rightly so, I've taken their money and their cards and they've got nothing to show for it. So I never wanted to be in a position where I was, I had their money, I had their cards, and they had nothing to show for it, and things could get out of hand. And also because, then you've got to go, well, hang on, I've already received their money, and then the bill comes in. You've got to be very strict with your accounting and what do you do with your money? You really, in that sort of scenario, you'd expect someone to be putting it into like an escrow type account where it sits there, and you use it purely to pay for the grading when it's finished. The whole sort of side of things that seems to have happened with that is a little bit different in terms of money was used for other things potentially. I don't know the full details, but my business was never going to be in that sort of realm of having people's money that I would then potentially use for other business ventures. So for me, it's definitely a case of people pay so PSA will finish grading. I'll know the grades. I'll tell people the grades are available, and then I'll send them invoices. So they'll be able to know their grades. They'll know the cards are about to come back, and they can pay their invoice, and I'll never ship them back to them until they've paid their invoice.
Yeah, sure.
So there's still that little bit of leverage, I guess, on my side in terms of being able to say, I've still got your cards. You need to pay. You won't get them till you pay. And look, 90% of the time, you'd find that even if I had to sell every single card someone sent in a sub, I could recover at minimum the grading fees if somebody just disappeared off the face of the planet. Because that's, I guess, the way cards work, right? You're sending off a grading. You might be paying $25 a card for some of those ones back in October, $20, $25 a card around that mark. They now come back. They might only be worth $25 each graded, or some might be worth 10 even because they graded low. But on average,
the Ben Simmons ones that were
exactly right. But on average, you've got that ability to sort of, keep it as low risk as possible. And to date, I've never had a problem. Everybody's been really great. Occasionally, some people have, openly admitted and said, since I sent them, I've lost my job due to COVID, or I've busted up with my wife and I'm now in a divorce and I'm, money's tight. I need to be able to do something else. And I'm really flexible as best I can with people to try and, give them a payment plan over a month if they need to. We're trying to get things like Afterpay and PayPal and on the website, so they've got that option as well. We just try and work with people as best we can because we understand that circumstances change over that time.
Yeah.
So and that's just the whole payment sort of money side of things. When it comes to fallout from it, I fully expect there'll be changes going forward. So dealers that have cards with PSA at a scale that leaves PSA vulnerable to loss of income essentially because they might be halfway through the grading process, they might be almost finished, and they're about, because we're talking about this is the that whole July to December of 2020 was things just went completely bonkers when it came to grading. It skyrocketed for everyone, not just us across the globe. So we're in that period right now where that massive amount of cards that hit PSA that caused things to cease are starting to finish. So there are going to be people who have sent cards in that are no longer financially fluid to actually be able to pay their bills.
Well, that's exactly what happened with Mark. So they sent him 3 bills that were $100K US each, and that's how all of this came to a head.
Yeah. He's not even the biggest guy in the US. He's probably maybe mid-tier. There's guys over there that I know have somewhere in the region of 250,000 cards at PSA.
Yeah.
That is still being processed. So
that scale really makes my head kind of explode a bit, I sort of look at my couple of boxes of cards and I'm like, I'm doing all right, and then you think 250,000 cards are being graded.
That's one company. They were sending that, I couldn't understand. We did 4,500 and it almost killed me. And we had 7 or 8 people working on that almost close to full time. It was just crazy. And to then look at these guys who are sending, 10 times that again. They must have 10, 20 people working on it, which is fine, but they could see the business in that at the time, that's their call. But yeah, I really feel that we're going to start seeing more of this. We're going to see a few more companies appear that go, aren't able to pay their full bills. And in order to prevent that, I suspect PSA are going to start pushing more and more and more for us to actually get, people, I guess, in terms of their whole, maybe getting a bank account almost like built up with PSA to actually have everything set in play and actually ready to go for when their bills come in. So yeah, we're lucky that we're already sort of set up for that with PSA. So we work on a cash in advance kind of approach that we've already got a balance with them that they draw down on, and we just keep topping the balance up because that works for me. Rather than what used to happen is that we'd all get individually billed, to a card, and the card would have to be topped up constantly and all this sort of stuff because it has a limit on it and all these sorts of things. So PSA have been really good, and their accounting department's really great. They work with us quite nicely to make sure all that happens. But yeah, I think some of the changes coming down the line are going to be things like your cards are about to start the grading process. Please ensure you have X dollars in your, in our account to cover the fees.
Generally, when a card is graded, now it's been a long time since I've had a card graded, and I used to just go with. I think the last time I got anything graded was years ago with Cherry. It was $25 a card, BGS.
Yep.
Send them off. 25 flat fee, done.
Yep, done.
Really easy.
Yeah, those are the days, right?
Yeah, that's.
And you get them back in 6 weeks.
Exactly, and you're like, what? 2 months of cards? That takes forever.
Yeah.
But with this day and age, sure, there's a final valuation fee and things. There's got to be a minimum cost, surely. Like, people should be able to. I mean, PSA should be able to take I suppose, a deposit for some sort of security to take.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There should be not a 2-part process, but there should be you get a little bit. Yeah,
you have to have if you've got X number of cards there, you need to have this much of your grading fees already sitting there with them to sort of as almost like that deposit, that bond, almost like a PSA bond. That you don't get back unless you pay your full fees or whatever it is. And
well, it's once the card's gone through as commenced grading. That is a non-refundable deposit. The costs of going through the grading process are at minimum X.
Yeah, and look, if you think of it along the terms of they do the same, when you put a minimum grade on a card, you still get charged if it doesn't get the minimum grade. There's no you get a 20% fee or whatever.
Correct.
Their basis is that it costs us to do all the work anyway, bar slab it. At the end and do the QA. Well, realistically, it doesn't, but it's just part of the process. They're not going to offer you a reduced fee because then everyone will put a minimum 10 on everything. If they don't get it, they'll just pay the $20 as opposed to 25 or whatever it is. But
for sure,
there's going to be a minimum cost to cover their overheads. 100%. And that may be an option they choose. Is essentially that a grading bond. You need to cough up a minimum amount of money before we will continue to proceed with grading your cards.
Imagine they charged you the maximum at the start and you got a refund from them upon return.
Yeah, no, the problem is, I guess with PSA, as you're well aware, they have varying tiers of fees. So, the fees never go down as such because, and this is the bit I explain to people, it's not just linked, for a long time, it wasn't just linked to purely value, it was turnaround. The under 500s and 100s are slightly separated at the moment in terms of their time frames by about 3 months. But at one point there, it actually did get very close to each other, where people were sort of saying, well, I'm paying the same, like a higher fee for the 500s, but they're coming back at the same time as the 100s. What's going on there? It's now separated a bit, which is good because that sort of makes more sense. But in terms of, so you get the minimum fee you pay, but then you've got the upcharges that come, which is what confuses a lot of people. They're like, why am I getting charged more for a card when I valued it at X? And there's a few things that do go into that, and the biggest one being is the PSA financial guarantee. And I was always a little bit like, I understand the premise of it, but I've never really seen it in action. Like, how does this actually work? Would they ever actually pay out under it? But we've actually had an example of it recently where they had sent us a card back graded. They identified on their end that it had actually been incorrectly graded and shouldn't, and it was a card that was basically it was the wrong card. They graded the wrong thing. They graded it as a certain card when it wasn't. And because of that, and they couldn't actually grade that card because of what it was. There's a fair bit involved in it. I won't go into the details.
It wasn't a Jersey Fusion, was it?
No, it wasn't anything like that. It was, it was one of those cards that are, there's always a bit of uncertainty around its heritage. And there's a few of them from the 90s that pop up every now and again that people are like, oh, I'm not sure if that's the real one or not. And PSA were just concerned that maybe they had done the wrong thing. So they got us to send the card back. They did a full reassessment of it, checked a whole bunch of things out, did a full review with their senior graders, determined that it wasn't, in fact, they couldn't say it wasn't. They said they weren't 100% certain that it was the right card. So they actually took it out of the slab, sent it back raw, and refunded the owner the full amount of what that card was worth in the grade that it was given. So if it was that actual card and it was in the marketplace and it would have sold for X amount of dollars, they gave him that much back.
Interesting.
And it was thousands of dollars. So they had to pay out of their own pocket thousands of dollars back to this customer because they had made a mistake but slabbed it and then realized afterwards. So, there's things like that I imagine, we've had it happen to us, and we send, X number of cards.
Yeah.
So we've sent, last year, sort of over that last 2 years, maybe 20 to 30,000 cards in total.
Yeah.
We've had it happen once, but I'm sure there's other guys out there in the US who have.
If they're doing 200,000. Yeah.
They've had it probably happen multiple times. The PSA is occasionally having to cough up this money. And sometimes that's really what it comes down to, is making sure
that goes back to the building of the trust, and that's another reason that these big graders have got these reputations, because if they do make a mistake, they own it, they fix it, and they've got a reputation for making things right, I guess.
Yeah, and look, we not to say we don't have just disagreements with them on certain things, and we've still got one at the moment we're trying to get resolved with them that we don't necessarily agree with their determination on it, because they make one choice, we've seen something else on our end that said it was different, and we're still trying to work through with them, and they do communicate with us. It can be a bit long process, but they know that, like anything, they're humans and they make errors. So
exactly,
it happens. We can only work on that and actually work as a team, and not sort of get annoyed at each other and angry, because it doesn't help the relationship long term.
Yeah.
I
think going back to what you were saying before about the different companies and their qualifications, do you think that, like, how do these new grading companies get off the ground and get themselves qualified? Because if we've been trying to reach out to Platinum for a couple of weeks now, and we just haven't been able to work out sort of a date and a time. But that's going to be really the first question I want to ask them, is like, how did you sort of, just like we asked you, how did you get here? Yeah. But also too, like, how do you, sort of form that body of knowledge, and, how do you get that experience up? Like, did they go over and intern for 12 months with PSA, or did they go overseas and intern with BGS and just sit there and just, do 10,000 cards or whatever it is?
Did they watch Laine's YouTube video on how to prepare your cards for grading? I actually like that YouTube video quite a lot. My partner, I put that on when my partner was like, blah, 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 graded cards. And how do you do this? I said, watch this video.
And next time, I probably need to refresh that one
with gloves to just be like, I don't want to touch the cards in case I get a fingerprint. I said, these are prison-based cards that are not worth anything. Yeah. Yep. This is chaff.
Yeah. No. It's a really good question. And I when I saw them sort of promoting stuff, and a few guys that I know around that were promoting them, I sort of posted, just objectively, not promoting any other business, just saying, really great, there's an Aussie company trying to break new ground and actually do, make this into a thing here. However, just be aware, there's things to think about. You've got to be comfortable with this and this before you send your cards to someone. You've got to be happy that you are trusting them, really, at the end of the day, and that you think that you're going to get something in return for it. Like, why would you send someone $50 of your money when what comes back from it doesn't add $50? And that it might actually hurt the value of your card. I just don't want to see people thinking that because someone's spent a lot of money on promotion or whatever it might be, that they're actually going to lead you down to having a return on investment. So the last thing I want to see is people lose their money for because they are sort of led down into believing that that's going to be giving them a return.
Yeah.
But I have actually spoken to at least one of the guys who's doing grading there. I haven't spoken to the business head, but he did tell me the details of the things you've just sort of suggested, and I won't spoil it for them. I'll let them
That'd be
talk
awesome.
you through all that.
Yeah, no, thanks, man. Yeah.
So I'll let them let them tell you that. But from my perspective, I've spent the best part of 5-6 years now staring at cards, lots of times, to try and understand, just even for myself, when I'm looking at a card, what makes a PSA 10? What's going to cause it to be a 9, a 6, a 7, a 5, a 3? And I've done it over probably 10,000 cards easily looked at. When I was doing cleaning, I probably did it over several thousand just cleaning, and then I've done all my own cards over the years as well, whether it be for BGS, PSA, or even SGC. And I've looked at predominantly sports cards across multiple different disciplines.
Yeah.
Yep.
And even then, I would not consider myself capable of being a grader. Even though I know what to look for, I still don't have the experience, I think, in terms of being able to do it on a consistent basis, day in, day out, and actually get the results for people and get it right every time. And part
You'd
of that
probably
is
be a great intern, though, considering you're an engineer and you like process, right?
Yeah, I do, but
this would be your lane, I reckon. Yeah.
But sometimes these things, right, you do get very, it can become monotonous as well, the whole process, and it can lead you to making errors and just getting lazy as well.
You'd have to enjoy repetition if you're doing that job.
do,
You know what I mean? Like the zen of kind of like just doing that
Yeah.
same process
Like doing
again
those puzzles
and again.
where it's like find the like the number 7 amongst all the whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you do puzzle after puzzle after found it. It's just
And it does. It takes a certain personality to be able to do those sorts of things, let alone have the knowledge as well to go with it. So yeah, like for me, those companies that we mostly trust in the hobby that to be able to do it correctly are the bigger ones that have done it for years, have a large group of people that have been around in that, whether they might have jumped between companies over time, and so be it. But I would, personally be expecting any new company that is setting up that wants to be seen as being, trustworthy and reputable, would have people, minimum people, not one person on their team who has spent significant time, at PSA, BGS, SGC, doing most. I'd prefer even them being a senior grader at those companies for many years.
So not the guy that was a janitor down at BGS for 3 weeks back in
exactly
2010.
Right. Yeah. Like if you want to actually say to promote your business and show your credibility, it would be to say, our head grader for sports card is, Jeff such and such, and he spent 10 years working for both PSA and BGS and was the senior grader for modern cards.
And we've headhunted him, and now he's like a partner in our business.
Exactly right. Like those are the sorts of people you'd expect to see, not some guy who's been back in the hobby like me for 5 years and has sent a whole bunch of cards off for grading and thinks he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
But routinely gets it wrong, like I do, because I send plenty of cards myself, and I routinely get back 9s, even 8s, and the occasional 7, which makes me go, what?
Yeah.
And then you go and have a look and you go, I missed that. Or So
I think that part of it, though, to be fair to you, I think there's like an emotional attachment to your own cards. I think in particular cards that you pull out of packs. Honestly,
that's a 9. I'm gonna send it anyway.
Yeah, I hope it comes back a 10.
It touches you inside. Yeah, I think you're better off like paying someone a couple of bucks to look at it before you send it off. Honestly, because that completely removes that emotional attachment that you've got to it.
Do you still offer the cleaning as a service?
We don't directly through our company. One of the issues being is insurance.
Yeah, of course.
As a registered business who needs to be insured, you try explaining to a insurance broker even how you want. Like it was hard enough trying to explain to them that I wanted to send, these large value packages overseas, and I wanted, transit insurance for them. They're like, they're worth how much? What's in them? How big are they? And I'm like, I don't know, 40 by 40 by 40 packages, and they're worth how much? Oh, $100,000. What? What's
you
inside
can
it?
send
Like
gold overseas cheaper.
And I'm like, no. And I've explained it to them, and like, they understood it and everything. We got through it all. But can you imagine me trying to tell them? I also want to take people's cards, look at them under a light, and rub a cloth over them to get any dust and fingerprints off.
Now,
I just can't do it.
What about like if you were a diamond, like you were a jeweler?
Yeah,
you'd be sort
I'm
of
sure.
in the same kind of. It's like, are you sure you're not like some jeweler trying to send some diamonds overseas on the dodge?
Exactly right. But that's the thing, right? The diamond. If you're a diamond dealer, you are selling things that'll have higher margin than me charging a few bucks per card on a grading. So that's the issue. My margin is so much lower, and therefore my insurance premiums it cost me like more of my overhead
Way
than I
too
like.
much.
So yeah, trying to add something in for that, it's near on impossible. So thankfully though, Lewis Neal, who he runs his own little sort of enterprise where it's not so little anymore. He puts together a bunch of cards every month for the submissions on behalf of people where he takes them in. He does an appraisal. He's got himself set up really well with magnification equipment, all these cleaning prep stuff. So it's it's all done above board too, because we're aligned with him. He has to make sure that what he does doesn't impact us when it goes through to PSA, because if PSA find beeswax or all that sort of rubbish that people like to try and rub on their cards to try and make them so they don't have a scratch.
Glossy.
Yeah. Look,
yeah,
worth their thing, but PSA will ban us from grading if that stuff happens. So, Lewis does basic wiping, cleaning type stuff to remove debris and fingerprints, but there's no like alteration or additions to the card.
No, you can't fix a damaged a card that's already damaged. But
exactly right.
If it's got some fingerprint.
You've got fingerprints. You've got little bits of. There's stuff even just in manufacturing that sticks to the cards. Things like that you can just remove from the surface without actually altering it. They're the sorts of things he looks at. But he also I guess the biggest, to me, the value that he provides that's really fantastic is he provides people with detailed images and a report, if you want to call it that, on each card that shows. This corner might be slightly soft under 10 times magnification. There's a little chipping on the edge here. The centering's slightly off left to right. There's a prism dimple here on a prism card or whatever it might be, or there's a dent on the back, and allows people to make a decision for themselves. Like, okay, and they'll always want him to say, oh, what grade do you think that is? And he might say, I think it's somewhere in this window of could be 7 to 9, depending on how harsh they want to be, because he can't give that number even himself. Like, the graders,
you can't. As soon as you make any kind of statement, your people will stick to it. They'll be like, you told me it was a So anyway, So that's the thing, right? But the thing is that he gives them the information to make a decision, and there might be things that they're like, oh, I didn't see that at all, like it wasn't visible, because a lot of people, when they look at cards, they might look at it under light in their office or their desk, and it's not obvious there's these defects. But like I think, as you mentioned in that video I showed, you really need to have that really bright light shining on the surface and look at it from multiple angles and get it under some sort of reflection, and then you can start to really see what's going on the surface, and you'll be amazed at what you can see. Sometimes you look at it one way, nothing wrong, you turn it sideways, get the light glare, and you see all this stuff appear, and people were like, oh. And that's why it's a surface 8.5. Yeah,
exactly right. Like, that's why you came back with a PSA 8, is because it had multiple surface dimples in it. But they weren't there when I sent it. It's like, well, I can't attest to that or not, but because I don't know how you look at your cards. But at the end of the day, I can only go on what PSA have sent back, and we don't touch the cards when they come through us. They're in a sleeve, top loader, or a semi-rigid. We do not pull the cards out. We do not.
No, you definitely wouldn't want to. Yeah, that's a one-way ticket to being liable. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't stab them with a pen or anything like that. We're careful.
Are you sure you don't just see a name on the envelope and just go, nah, that's it?
Nah,
he goes, nah.
Couldn't do it. Even if I didn't like the person, I love cards too much to do that to him.
Exactly. It's like, I despise this person. I value that piece of cardboard way too much.
Exactly right. I'm sitting next to a tower of cards that are mostly base. Like, there's boxes next to me here that are just full, thousands of base cards from the day I started collecting. I rarely, if ever, throw a card out unless it's like been used as packing material inside an envelope and has got sticky tape on it. They usually end up in my commons pile because I'm just, I just respect cards too much, unfortunately. And that's one of the reasons why I had to get an office and take everything out of my house. It's because the house was full of cards and,
Well, like you said, you're accumulating so many. You could actually just build a house out of the cards.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just use them as bricks.
Exactly.
Building bricks.
Card bricks. Yeah, it'd be nice. It'd be innovative.
I'd love to build a house of cards just so I had a house of cards.
So, did you see that Naughty Lordy video that was on the Australian Progressives page last week?
Oh, I can't remember. No, maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. I see a lot.
He, this guy, literally, he stuck together this parcel just with like loose base cards,
Oh,
glad
yeah,
wrapped
right.
it, and then sticky taped it together. It was just the most amazing thing ever. The other
Yeah,
thing
look.
that just made me think about what you were saying before was about destroying cards. Do you remember that breaker that cut in half with a penknife the Laurie Marketing
Yeah,
1 of 1?
that was platinum
That was
cards.
unbelievable. I still can't get over that. Yeah, that's like left me scarred.
Yeah, look, G-Man's an interesting character, but he's yeah, he does his thing, how he does his thing, and that was a bit of a statement for him. I know there was a bit of backstory behind all of that, but a lot of people just saw the card getting destroyed. There was some issues, I think, with eBay or something, or with a sale that went wrong or something, and somebody was, there was a lot of uproar about something on one side and the other, and I think he just decided that at the end of the day, nobody should have the card. It was almost like it was cursed.
I think it got jammed in the one touch. I think that's what happened to it.
There was something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember full details.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there for this episode, and we'll be back on Wednesday for the second part of Laine's interview, and we'll finish off with his story now about other members in the community destroying cards, and we'll also talk about the recent eBay news with eBay providing an authentication service. So again, guys, thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Thanks a lot.